And we're
All right,
live.
we are live. Fantastic to see everybody, even though we don't actually see anybody. But it's good to be here this evening with Miss Alexandra of PersEd.
It's always a pleasure having a discussion with you, Paul.
Absolutely. So I suppose we can get started. As a brief sort of introduction into what we're doing here, this is Interchange, which is our monthly dialogue between PersEd, which focuses on soft skills and development, and the Time Repair Corporation, which wants to take an angle toward sustainability, specifically the kind of sustainability that we apply to ourselves and our personal resources in this case. And the two of us started talking, and we want to be able to expand this discussion and bring in more folks who have interesting angles so that we can make it a global community that starts having this conversation. So right now we have Finland and Lebanon represented. Make sure that you reach out and join us and become a part of the discussion if you're interested. And let's get some representation from some other parts of the world. I'm originally from California, have been living in Finland for about 7 years. And Alexandra, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
And I'm from Lebanon, but I'm also in the same time Greek. So we have 4 countries and 2 people. And the more countries we have and the more thoughts and ideas we have, I think the conversation would be on a completely different level. The fact that we are in contact together, and it happened randomly 2 months ago, and it happened online. It actually started online. It really shows the power that we have of technology in terms of platforms and how they operate in a way. And the beauty of it is we have this sharing of thoughts, this sharing of ideas with after having given our idea and after having lost it, but we go back with our own. We go back home with the ideas of the people we have exchanged with. We go back enriched, and it completely transforms the way we see things. And actually last session, so it was the first episode that we had last month, was about community and about the power of community and sharing and dialogue and having conversation. And this is not something that we decided to talk about because, yeah, it's interesting to talk about it, but because we believe in it, because we live through it and abide by its values and everything that it can bring for us. Today's discussion will be a bit different, and it goes hand in hand with everything that we've been living. Wherever you are around the world today, 2020 has been tough. And I think this is the least that we can say in terms of how weird and random and chaotic and challenging the past few months have been. So after having brainstormed together and discussed few ideas that are quite important to discuss and have on the agenda, globally and locally, we thought best to talk about anxiety and resilience because these two are very connected. When we go through hardships and situations of difficulty, and here I'm talking from a very local and fresh perspective with after what happened in Lebanon on August the 4th, which is the third biggest explosion in history, you understand that wherever you go, there are cases, there are situations that are going to force you and corner you in that feeling of anxiety and overwhelm. And the only thing that you can do is be resilient. Now, these are all beautiful words or very scary words. And what we decided to do is to sort of break them down, try to understand the mechanics of it all, and observe it from different angles. And I want to add to what Paul said at the beginning. These are our perspectives. We want more perspectives. So we want you to join us in the discussion. If you have a personal experience, if you have an opinion you'd like to share, feel free to share it, comment it, wherever you are, on whatever social media channel you are, reach out to us and tell us more about your opinion, more about your thoughts.
Absolutely.
And perhaps, Paul, we can start with something that is very simple and very straightforward and makes sense to start with it. How can we define anxiety?
Right. And that's really sort of the key. For me, For me, it's always been that moment when internal feelings of unrest stop you from doing what you need or want to be able to do. That's the limit where I would place it at anxiety myself. And when you look at it mechanically or biomechanically in this case, all it is a balance of neurotransmitters. It's your brain releasing serotonin in some cases and dopamine in other cases. And sometimes, if you're under stress, and especially if you've been under stress for an extremely long period of time, you can actually lose the ability to regulate your emotions in the way that you used to be able to. You go into what's known as a serotonin fatigue, in which you've used up all the neurotransmitters and your body just doesn't know what to do anymore. And so you can enter into sort of long-term anxiety and depressive states. And it's not something you have a choice about. It's not something you can just immediately snap your fingers and get better from. And it's something that people need to be able to take just as seriously as a bullet wound or a broken leg. You can't necessarily do the things that you need to be able to do in your daily life when you're afflicted with anxiety. And that's that's sort of something that culturally in the world where we're getting more used to. The idea that not every wound is obvious, external, or physical, but it's something that people still need to hear, because the most defining traits of a lot of different mental conditions, including depression, including anxiety, is a feeling of isolation. That's what hits you the hardest, is feeling like you're alone in what you're going through, and that there's nobody to talk to, and that you're a burden. And that's not the case. Whenever you're going through any of this, you absolutely have to be able to do what you can to reach out and be connected to that community that we discussed last time. So when we're looking at these different states that are during the sleep fatigue, the sleep deprivation, the heightened heart rate, the other problems that can come along, shortness of breath that can come with anxiety, we've got to be able to look past just the physical symptoms and start to look at what's causing them, what's making the anxiety in our life. I believe, Alexandra, that you've got a few things to talk about with that in the world that we're living in today, especially being in Beirut. Honestly, even though you've described it to me directly, I still can't wrap my brain around having it just that close. Would you like to open up a bit? Tell us your thoughts.
Sure. What you have said about needing to understand the why behind it, I think this is very important. Self-awareness in a situation like that is crucial, because it allows us to understand a bit more about how we're feeling and what we can, and afterwards what we can do about it. So what happened in Beirut on August the 4th, even us living here in Lebanon and in Beirut, we cannot really wrap our heads around it yet. The sheer amount of destruction that followed, the number of casualties, the 300,000 people who were displaced, more than 6,000 people who were injured, 220 people died. That's today's number, and some are still in critical situation. And these are just numbers. So the numbers, they shock you, but the experience is not a number. Being at home, feeling safe, and then all of a sudden everything is shaking around you. In certain locations, everything is shattering around you. Perhaps you don't have a roof anymore. Perhaps the entire wall is destroyed. Perhaps you're inside your car and you feel at some point your car is flying, and you open the door and you get on the street and everything is black. And these are stories that I've heard, some of them to a certain extent. So house shaking, yes, I went through that. But just seeing this huge mushroom cloud, just seeing it and thinking, oh, that was 7 kilometers away from me, or that was 2 kilometers away from me. It puts you in a state of insecurity, where you feel insecure. And I think COVID-19 did that as well. You can go to the supermarket and feel insecure. because there are so many people who went there before you, who might have touched an item, and you might get coronavirus. Everything that has been happening in the world, the protests and all of that, we feel at the core that we are in a state of randomness and chaos. And there's a new acronym that we've been using a lot lately, and it's called the VUCA model. So what's the VUCA model? V for volatility. So everything is volatile, go ups, go down, like the economy, for instance, or the currency exchange rate. The U for uncertainty. We're uncertain. We don't know what can happen tomorrow. We don't know if there's going to be another lockdown or no lockdown. In Beirut, we don't know what will happen exactly. Is there going to be another explosion because of negligence, because of 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate that is not stored properly? So we don't know. We're uncertain. Then there's complexity. And complexity is something that I think is very well expressed by this expression that you said, Paul. I cannot wrap my head around it. It's so complex that I cannot wrap my hand around it. If it was simple, I would have understood it very easily. There's a question and then there's an answer. In this case, there's no question and answer. It's just a lot of questions and practically no answers, or completely different answers. And then there's the A of ambiguity. Could be it, could be not it, could be something else, could be tomorrow, could be the day after tomorrow. And there's this entire ambiguity, uncertainty, complexity, volatility. And you know what? That doesn't help anxiety. If anything, it makes it worse. So even if you're living a normal and comfortable life and you have moments of anxiety, or you have deadlines approaching, or you have something in your personal life, and then you add another layer to it, which is whatever the world has to offer you, anxiety escalates. It completely escalates. And it's true that I'm speaking from a personal and local perspective with what happened in Beirut, but a lot of things that happened, perhaps at different level. And there's something that is very important that needs to be said. It's that the level doesn't matter when we're talking about anxiety. And I don't know, perhaps, Paul, you have something to say about that?
Absolutely. There is a degree of relativity when you're looking at these problems, because every one of us experiences things somewhat differently than everyone else. We have different ways of seeing, as you can tell from the different color ranges that different people are able to see, which is something we don't think about. But one person's red is not the other person's red necessarily. They may see more in it, more light spectrum. It's the same with the way that we perceive things going on around us. And honestly, you don't need to be especially atypical neurologically in order to experience things that much differently. And a part of it is also related to the misconceptions that are linked to anxiety. This idea, again, that I mentioned briefly earlier, that, oh, well, you'll just, stop feeling like that. Like, well, just stop. Like, it's not a choice that everyone has. And the thing I think that you were hitting on just at the end there, that there are different sizes of anxiety. It doesn't change the validity of any of them. And honestly, when you have COVID-19 or the explosion in Beirut or any of the other numerous ridiculous problems that have just sprung into being in 2019. I mean, thankfully, the murder hornets, saw we were already having some problems and just said, we'll come back in a few years. Don't worry about it. It's fine. You guys have got enough problems. But even without those massive problems, the anxiety that you personally might feel over something that other people consider small and trivial is every bit as valid. It's every bit as threatening to your ability to get things done. And just being able to accept that validity, understanding that maybe someone else could feel this and push through it. Maybe they wouldn't experience it the same way, but I do feel it. And it does have this particular impact on me. Being able to say that out loud to yourself is already a step in the right direction. because it's validating the legitimacy of what you feel, and that's the first step to taking time and energy for self-care, which is absolutely essential. Not just self-care, but self-care without guilt. Because if every time you stop and, take care of yourself, you're thinking about everything that you're not doing, you're just going to be eating yourself alive with more anxiety over it, over everything that's piling up. But the truth is, just like you need sleep, you need to maintain your mental state. And part of that is acknowledging the problems that you're encountering and being okay with the idea of taking care of yourself. Because just like they say, every time you get onto an airplane, you have to put on your own oxygen mask first before you help anyone who needs assistance or any children around you. It's very important that they get help too, but if you both pass out, everyone loses. So you have to take that self-care, and you have to encourage others to do the exact same thing. When you find a friend who is experiencing anxiety, it's not always going to be that they have a rubber band around their wrist and they're snapping it to push away the bad thoughts. They might not carry a paper bag with them, but you'll be able to tell that they're having trouble getting through what they're doing. You have to be able to be there for them, to remind them that self-care is absolutely legitimate and absolutely valid. Otherwise, just like you felt yourself, I'm sure at some time or other in your life, they'll be overwhelmed too. They may feel alone in what they're experiencing. And what's the point of that when we have connections to everyone on the planet? We can reach out to anyone on any continent now. Someone is feeling what you're feeling, and it's absolutely worth being able to accept that whether you've spoken to them or not, what you're feeling is valid. You have everything it takes to be able to carry that weight. It may mean that you need some kind of external support. That's just fine too. I mean, we are, as I said, from a biomechanical perspective, very, very complicated machines. We're doing an awful lot with our bodies already, and our brains are ridiculously complex. The number of things that can be going on with them are way beyond our understanding. Just understanding when things are working normally, when our brains are under stress, when our brains are, maybe not wired as typically as they might be. We find workarounds, but we have to be able to use the resources at our disposal and be there for one another as much as needed, possibly as well. So taking into account the amount of time and energy that we put into self-care, into care for one's family, how we manage that pressure ends up becoming a much bigger question. And I'd like to kick it right back to Alexandra on that topic, managing that stress, that pressure over time, if you were to put it in engineering terms.
Oh, yes, of course. And I love what you said about self-care and how the comparison with the masks in the airplanes, we tend to forget that in the day-to-day life. It perhaps it comes naturally when you're in a plane because you've heard it so many times. But in the day-to-day life, perhaps we don't pay as much attention to that. And bringing that up and putting some light on it, that's super important. Now, let's go into super practical terms. So what can we do practically if we're facing a situation that is stressful? One very interesting tool that we can use is the 4 A's. So we have 4 A's involved, and each A is representative of one word. The first one is avoid. So if it's a stress that you can avoid, by all means, avoid it. If there's an outing that is causing you stress and anxiety, and the company of the people is not inspiring you and is going to get you feel worse about yourself, and you can avoid that, then by all means do that. If you're at home and you are stressed about COVID-19 and you're living with your parents, and your parents are perhaps people at risk, and you yourself are at risk, and you don't want to allow anyone to come in, then by all means, don't allow anyone to come in. create a space where you do not let an external stressor to exert extra pressure on you. So the first A is avoid. Just avoid it altogether. Then there's another A, which is alter. Alter means transform. It means change. So when you have a situation and the situation is causing you stress, but you cannot really avoid the context, for instance, if it's related to work, what you do is that you change the situation. You have to go to work, but perhaps you change where you are seated. In a way, you are avoiding, but you're not avoiding completely. You're just transforming the situation. You're just altering the ecosystem in a way that would allow the external stressor to go away, and you will create a small bubble of personal comfort, of security. And this is something that is very important when we talk about stress, because stress is all around us. And the more of it that we can avoid, the more of the situations that we can alter, the better off we are. Now, in a lot of cases, these two don't work. And this is where we have to, in a way, upgrade the A, and it becomes the A of adaptability. So we need to adapt to new circumstances. In Lebanon, for instance, we've been going through severe economic troubles with strong devaluation, strong inflation, capital control over bank accounts in foreign currencies. And all of that is something that we cannot change, we cannot alter, and we cannot avoid. So what happens next is that we need to adapt. We need to find new ways of doing things, different strategies in order to ensure that we can still survive the month, the week, the day. It really depends. It's a case-by-case basis. So adapting is something that is essential, that is quintessential, because if we don't adapt, we are going to struggle, and the struggle is going to bring us down. And the more we stay in that spot of struggle, the harder it will be to get out of it. And that is why adaptability is important, is so important. Darwin, the strongest species is the species that it's out. Not the smartest, but the one that is most adaptable. And adaptability is something that is absolutely necessary in the 21st century because of the VUCA model and because of the fast change. Things are going at a rate that is faster than anything that the previous generation have ever experienced. And that's why adaptability is so important. Now we move to the final A, which is the A of acceptance. There are things that are outside our zone of control. And we need to accept that. We're not godlike beings. We're not in control of everything. We're here, and around us, we have what we call a circle of influence. These are the things that we can change, that we can control, that we can influence. And outside is everything else. The things that we, as individuals, cannot control, cannot influence. And we have to accept that when things happen outside of our circle of influence, the only thing that we can do is accept them. So yes, I acknowledge that this happened, although it's inconvenient, although it's tragic, although it hurts me, although it's challenging, whatever the adjective that you're going to use, although fill in your adjective, I can still have an influence over the things that are around me, that are within my circle. And in a way, this is comforting. Why? Because it reminds us that there are still certain things that we can alter, that we can change, that we have a sense of control over, and that brings us a sense of certainty. So we talked about the VUCA model. We talked about the high level of uncertainty. And uncertainty is sometimes something that is extremely interesting, because you don't really know what is going to come out of it. There could be something negative. A lot of times it is. But out of that, there could be a lot of positive things. But in order to go from the negative that uncertainty can bring to the positive that it can breed, we need something. We need a sense of acceptance, adaptability, smart avoidance, and smart alterations. And we mostly need the ability to acknowledge that we still have influence and control over certain things, and that these things can have positive ripple effects, because these things can eventually influence in an indirect way everything that is happening around us. So these are 4 things, 4 verbs. Don't forget them. Avoid, alter, adapt. And what was the last one, Paul?
Avoid, alter, adapt, accept.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that's not the only way. So, Paul, how else can we, as you said, manage it over time?
That's really good. And honestly, I think that people being able to look at their anxiety through that lens is fantastic. Being able to sort of break down where they can work and make a difference and where they can't, and then accept, or as you said at the end, even acknowledge, to be able to vocalize out loud afterward. This is what I experienced. I've already moved through those 4 A's, and now I'm going to a 5th, which would be to acknowledge the situation and let people know. I think that is the beginning of what I would want to look at as a tool to work with anxiety, to work with depression, to work with a lot of different modern day issues, which are honestly at record heights during these times. Before COVID, we were already at record heights worldwide for anxiety and depression, especially among teens. It's something where we haven't been able to avoid a lot of these ideas and a lot of these fears. And that's something that means a lot to me personally. That's why I founded the Time Repair Corporation, is sort of this why. I don't want people to have to be afraid of tomorrow, of the future. And Simon Sinek, who has, he did the wonderful TED Talk on the why. Start with why, he said. And there was a beautiful book. I've actually got a copy as well. And looking at that myself, that's part of why I founded the company the way I did, is that before anything else, you need to look at why you're doing the things you want to do. Why do you do anything at all? And that can be part of those 4 A's. When you're avoiding some things, you can ask yourself, why do I need to do that? If you can't come up with a good answer, great, avoid. Perfect. And wonderful. You need to eat every day, but doing the dishes just causes you amazing amounts of stress. Great. Don't do the dishes. Get some kind of biodegradable plates and just give yourself a life hack so that you can get through that experience and adapt yourself to a system that works for you, whatever it is. It may not be always the most sustainable thing, but it's got to be something that works for you. In that way, you can sort of move through things. But that why, I think, is the key to it. Because when you stop and sort of breathe in and out and look at the things that matter to you. I ask a lot of people when I'm in conversation with them, a strange question. I always tell them it's a weird question. And some of the people watching this will probably recognize immediately, oh, it's one of Paul's weird questions. But you're going about your work. You've finished out a large project. Everything's in a good place. Your debts are pretty well paid. Your family's pretty well taken care of. You go down and outside and you stretch a little bit and you're looking up at the stars and you suddenly feel a pinch in your arm or your chest. And you see yourself falling to the ground and growing smaller, and the city is growing smaller, and the country is growing smaller, and soon the entire world is shrinking down until it's just a beautiful blue marble floating in space in front of you. And you realize that you're no longer a part of that world. And the question is, if at that moment you knew you could change any one thing about the planet that you've left behind, that you're no longer a part of, whether it's big or small, abstract or concrete, what would it be that you would change? By asking yourself that question, you're asking yourself about what you want to change before your mortality catches up with you. Because once again, we're not gods. We're just people. We're all flawed. We've all got problems. But whatever it is that you want to make a change with, whatever it is that you want to leave better than you found it, that is your why. That's something that's bigger than you. And it can be religious if you're religious, and it can be just close to your heart, whether you're religious or not, whether it's feeding the hungry or helping the oppressed or just a more sustainable future, or even just building something, some kind of legacy that lasts. Whatever it is, it can be the tool that helps you push through your depression, your anxiety, your conflicts internally. Whatever those are, being able to sort of put it into those terms, I think that can only really happen once you've accepted the existence of that anxiety, as you've said, Alexandra, and by having this why, you can start fighting the physical symptoms that come along with anxiety and fear. Because when you're afraid, you don't create. When you're afraid, you don't take chances. When you're afraid, you don't reach out and introduce yourself to new people. No, it's we're built to protect ourselves when we're afraid. You either run or you fight. And when you can't do either one, you just become a nervous wreck of, neurotransmitters and internal chemical reactions, which is kind of rough, but that's the world we live in. It's not okay to necessarily just, punch your way through every problem, but some of us are wired that way too. So being able to work this out and at least find a balance, because you don't have to be, Oh, yeah, exactly. Black Dean has just commented in the StreamYard feed that the purpose of life is not to be happy. It's to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, and to have it make some difference that you've lived and lived well. And that is a beautiful why, because he's right. It's absolutely not about being happy 100% of the time. You're not gonna be. You're gonna be sad part of the time. You're gonna have conflicts, but working through those and the choices you make in them should be things that you're proud of. And having that why sort of helps you to put those into perspective and to balance out the feeling that you have, because you feel very strongly about things, but knowing how it looks in perspective to the why, in perspective to something larger than you, it can really help you to make those decisions and feel proud of them, which is again related to that self-care. You can then sort of break this cycle and remove this weight, this pressure that's been on you to do everything that you might not have really needed to do. Some of it you need to, and it's really important to be able to get to that. But having that why can really help to change the way you get through those day-to-day activities. I feel like that's really sort of the key. And then once you've got that why, what you do with it. I mean, what do you think, Alexandra? When you've got your why, how do you start pushing through anxiety at that point? What comes next after you've got either your 4A's or your why and you're starting to manage what you're dealing with?
I think Black statements, they go after that. Your statement, Black, thank you for writing them. They're on spot. What you said, the purpose of life is not to be happy. The fact that we feel happy, that we feel joy, that we feel satisfaction, that we feel excitement, that we feel passion exists in relation to an opposite. And in a way, these opposites balance out. And somewhere in between, there we are. We exist. And if we exist, why not do something about that? Why not do something beautiful and exciting and purposeful? Yes, it's about self-care, Paul, but it's not just about self-care. It's also about caring for your community. It's also about caring for the world. And this is where I joined Black. It's about thinking what it is that you can do. What kind of legacy can you leave? And what is it that is within your circle of influence? What is it that you can do today, no matter how simple, how small it is, even if it's just as small as an ant? It doesn't matter how small it is, but one thing that you can do today that can make the world, that can make the community, that can make your house, that can make one's personal life 0.0001% better. If you get there, that's already very good. That's already very, very good. And what you say about why, I love Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, and I love the idea of why, because it's strong, it's a driver, it keeps you going. And when you feel that things are falling apart around you, when you're feeling that 2020 is happening to you instead of happening for you, you need something else to sort of grab onto. You need a sort of an anchor, and your why is an anchor. What's really interesting about this idea of anchor is that when you have a why, automatically you have movement. Because when you have a reason, you have a purpose. You have a motive, you want to do something. So there's an A, the beginning of the alphabet, and then there's a Z, which is the end of the alphabet. And then you have all the alphabets in between. But your A, your motive, cannot reach Z, the purpose, if you don't go through B and C and D and F and all the way to Z. So by embracing this flow, by embracing this movement, you're giving yourself direction. And even if you feel scattered, like Beirut after the explosion, we felt scattered. We felt shattered. We felt pulverized, the same way the capital was scattered and shattered and pulverized. What happened in the hours following the explosion is that people went on the streets to donate blood, to help the emergency team, from the Red Cross to nurses, because even hospitals were down and patients were treated in parking lots because the hospitals were down. So people went there to help however they could. The following days, people started cleaning the streets. They brought food boxes to support the families who lost everything. The house, the fridge, the car, everything. And a couple of days later, there started some relief work. People went to discover what are the needs of the families in the different houses around Beirut to prepare for the rebuilding phase. The purpose was to rebuild Beirut, to bring back what we have lost as citizens, as inhabitants, as people from the community. The beautiful part in this is that there's a sense of movement. And what you experience when you're there in the streets, when you're helping, when you're supporting, when we're coming up with ideas and new initiatives and projects, and at PersEd we've been doing that as well, is that all of these parts, all of these things that are scattered, that are shattered, that are pulverized, even within you, that sense of movement acts like an anchor, acts like gravity. And it sort of brings all the different pieces of yourself into the center. It's like a tunnel. And everything that was shattered within you, all the stress, all the anxiety, all the fear, all the uncertainty, all the overwhelm, it sort of shrinks and gets closer and closer and closer to that center. And this center is moving. It's moving. It's moving towards a purpose, which is to support others, to give back to the community, to rebuild a city, to support the economy, to help out the families that were inflicted, to help out the youth who've lost hope. And I'm just talking again from a personal perspective because it just happened. We discussed the topic of anxiety and resilience before the explosion, and then it happened. And I thought, okay, this is an opportunity to talk about it and to show that even in the most extreme cases, the sense of flow works. The sense of movement works. When you bring in everything that you think you've lost about yourself, and you give it a meaning and you give it a direction, it lessens a bit the impact and the overwhelm, and allows you, as we said before, to transform that part of negative into a part of positive. And that is extremely powerful. And it's extremely purpose oriented, because there's a purpose. Because when there's a why, there's a how, and then there's an outcome, which is what we're doing. But this is one approach of doing things, which is very purpose oriented. It's not the only one. It's definitely not the only one. And Paul, I think you have some really interesting thing to share about this other way of doing things, of embracing life, that is not necessarily as active and purpose oriented, but can be as efficient.
Absolutely. Again, we've gone over a few times, there are lots of different ways to experience anxiety and lots of different ways to experience life and to go through it. And I really loved it. Dean's had some fantastic explanation in the comments about his own why and how he keeps motivated through life, which is fantastic. If you guys get the chance, you should absolutely talk to him. Wonderful guy, and very focused, part of the global citizen community, which I've just joined myself, which is very exciting. But when you're looking at these problems, when you're looking at all of the situations in life, sometimes there can be this feeling that that you need to be doing something, and that maybe you've been trying things for a long time, and that can be a very defeating sort of realization that I've been trying for so long and I'm still just at the bottom and I feel torn to pieces. That's a bit the way that I personally experience life, is this feeling that sometimes things are happening and I don't have the control over it. And the idea that control itself is an illusion is a really common and old idea. It's the basis of a lot of different philosophies. But an important thing to think about when you're going through that sort of feeling, especially if you're that type of person, is that there are very different approaches to these things, and approaches that don't level the same kind of blame. For example, in Eastern philosophy, if you look at Taoism, you have this very simple concept, and the whole idea of Taoism, Tao just means a way, so the way of life is the rough translation. And you have this idea there that things will happen, with or without you. They're going to happen. You're already here. You exist. That is just something that can be observed. But the entirety of the philosophy is very much based on a simple engineering approach. You're not judging things as being good or bad. You're just looking at what is and how you're responding to it. And this can be an important thing. There's a basic Taoist analogy of life and our existence in life, life itself being very much like Alexandra was describing. You're sort of moving forward. So you're in a stream. Life is a stream that is forever flowing past certain points. And you start at the top as a leaf. And you're going to go through a certain amount of that stream, whether you like it or not. Life is pulling you forward, whether you like it or not. We exist in time. And so we are experiencing it just one moment at a time. Whatever the present is, that's where you are. And so as you experience that moment, you may struggle against what's going on in the stream, but the flow of your life is going to carry on with or without you. You may experience turbulence because things external to you, things out of your control, happen around you. And the more you try to fight against some of them, the more you wear yourself out when you're not actually really making much movement. Sometimes that idea of acceptance from the 4 A's and that concept that you will go to a location sooner or later, whether you want to or not. Just being able to accept that movement forward can sort of free you a little bit mentally, so that you can look at it not as something you're predestined to do or that you're forced to do, because that's not the point of it. The point is that looking at it from a farther distance, you sort of have a different perspective on it. It's not what you have to do. It's just a description of what you eventually will do. And it works actually with that why. If you have a why, something that you're working toward a little bit every day, right? As Dean said, there's no remote. You get up and you put in some work every day. You don't have to be a novelist today, even if that's what you really want to do with your life. Great. Write a sentence. Then write a couple of more sentences until you have a paragraph. Today, maybe you just write one page, and then tomorrow you can write another, and another the next day. That is taking things absolutely one day at a time. You're not stressing yourself about how much you need to write. You don't know how long the book will be until you finish it. So you have to be able to take that time and spend it doing things that matter to you. Because as soon as you've accepted that you are moving forward, whether you like it or not, you then suddenly have options open up for you. You can suddenly see all of the things that you intend to do, and you also start seeing the things going on around you. Because you described earlier chaos being something happening outside of your influence of control. You don't control that chaos, but you can perceive that chaos. You can look for the right opportunities, for the chance to grow with other people, for the chances to interact with your community and provide valuable ideas and services. And honestly, that alone can be enough easily to start pushing you forward and out of the anxiety that you feel personally. For me, one of the most important things is once you've gone through some kind of a pain, whatever it is, you don't forget about it. You don't push it deep, because that's not terribly healthy either. You want to be able to remember it, accept it, and, as I said, acknowledge it, so that you can see and recognize other people going through the same sorts of things. It may not be that they absolutely need your help, because they've got to be able to get to that stage as well. They've got to be able to accept what they're going through if they are. But if they do need your help, and if you do have that conversation with them, you can be there for them. You can lighten the load a little bit. You can talk about the things that you want to do and sort out ideas. You can talk about the things they want to do and the places where they specifically are running into problems. And even if you can't help, just sometimes listening is a fantastic contribution to be able to give. And one of the most vital ones that we can do is just to listen and be a part of the things happening outside our little leaf, floating through that chaos that is life. Being able to look a little further down the stream, maybe you won't be able to make it as far as you'd like. That's not in your control, but you can do your best, and you can take little steps every day that take you closer to whatever that goal is. I think that's sort of the key value that I feel brings anxiety itself as a topic into the purview of this whole interchange dynamic. I want us to be able to sort of make it something that's experienced both individually and through a group lens, so that people can see that there's not just one way of doing things right. And ideally, so that we can get more people contributing and making this a part of what we want to accomplish together. That's half of why I've been so happy just chatting with Alexandra about this, that, and the other, between our different startups, between the different larger goals that we've got for the world. It's important to be able to sort of bounce ideas around and hear what other people are looking at and how they're experiencing it. That's been sort of what's made this a wonderful experience.
It has. I want to challenge it a bit, Paul. Because you
Please.
talked about the leaf that is going always down that stream.
Yeah.
And sometimes you feel that your purpose is not to go down the stream, but to go up
Mm,
the stream.
yeah.
So should you go with the flow or should you fight? Now, this
And
is an interesting question. This is an
and
interesting
it
question.
really is.
What I would say is that as a leaf, you can decide to leave the stream, go on land, walk again, up, 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 and then get in the water like the kids use the slide and just go with the
Yeah.
flow. And then
And
go
just
up,
ride it
up again,
again.
and the land, and just go with the flow and just have fun with it.
Right.
Because there is part of life that is also about fun, about joy, about these beautiful moments, about thinking outside the box, about being
Yeah.
creative. Who said there's only one stream? There could be another
Exactly.
stream. There's the land. If you cannot use the stream, you can use the land. If you can fly, then there's the sky. There are so many different things that are available for us. And as you said, Paul, there are so many different ways of going through things. And sometimes you don't want to you accept, but you don't want it to impose itself on you. So the situation is bad, but you don't want everything else in your life to be bad because of the situation.
Yeah.
Accepting the fact that there are things around you that are not the way you want to doesn't mean that you abandon your life. Just like, "Ah, I don't want to do this anymore."
Right.
No, no, you sometimes you have to fight. And fighting, sometimes you have to resist economically, politically, socially,
Mm,
personally.
absolutely.
And what's interesting about that is that even in the times where you feel that you are walking or swimming in reverse and that the stream is going in the opposite direction, there is within you a sense of alignment. And despite the fact that everybody else is going in the other way, as long as you feel aligned with yourself, as long as you feel that you are mentally, emotionally within your own stream, you're aligned with yourself, you're aligned with your why, you're aligned with your goal, you just go with it and fight for what you want. So when we talk about acceptance, we're not talking about abandonment. So it's an A of acceptance, it's not an A of abandonment. And there's a huge difference between the two. So yes, there's going to be fight, there are going to be challenges, there are going to be difficulties. There are days that you might want you wouldn't want to go to work, or you wouldn't want to wake up in the morning, or that calling someone might be stressful. Sometimes just have to go with it.
Yeah.
And once it happens, it suddenly feels less burdening. And you grow stronger with every decision that you take to fight for what it is that you want and to fight for who you want to become in the next 5 minutes, who you want to become tomorrow, and eventually who you want to become in 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now. So I
Exactly.
just wanted to challenge this a bit, just to spice it up. And eventually it's dialogue that makes it work, right?
Right. Absolutely. And actually, the funny thing is the challenge that you gave actually digs into that same philosophy as well. That's the whole idea. Once you and your leaf in the stream are aligned in yourself, then suddenly all of the things you experience aren't shaken by that same turbulence of you just, sort of not knowing what's going on. You've got purpose. You can move in whatever direction you need to. The whole stream idea is basically just time. You don't get back yesterday, but
True.
you can climb up that slide and have fun today again, like you did yesterday. That's absolutely at the core of what it's about. And I'm really glad that you looked at it from that angle, because I don't think I had gotten that actually covered well enough in what I was explaining. That's really fantastic. It's
Dialogue.
right. And again, it's that dialogue. So what let's see, what kind of a conclusion can we draw from the dialogue we've had today? If we were to find the red thread connecting all of our topics, how would we push through?
That's going to be a tough one. We've covered a lot
Right?
of topics within the topic of anxiety and resilience. But I'd say that, wait, let's break it down into its parts. We have a sense of direction.
Yep.
Right? We have a start, which is your why.
Yep.
And we have an end, which is a purpose.
Yep.
And we
We've
have a
got
process.
different tools, processes to be used, either VUCA and the 4 A's, or even just looking at the why and your perspective on the problems.
And acceptance. So both two I'd say two approaches, which is the vita passiva and the vita activa. So the vita passiva, which is the act of contemplation, and the vita activa, which is an act of doing and working. So you have to work for it, you have to fight for it. But in the same time, you have to take the time to reflect and contemplate and understand and be attuned with yourself and the world. And in a way, these two complement each other. So we have a start, we have an end, we have both the active and the passive, we have the tools and the concepts and the processes. I think that's good engineering.
It's true. It's true. And looking at that total engineering to product sort of line, when you take that perspective on it, you see that all of this is a process. We all exist at any given moment at a process of handling our own internal anxieties and experiencing them and ideally growing. We may just experience this one moment individually, but by being able to look at everything with a different perspective, by being able to reach out to our communities and support systems, we can sort of see what can come next. We can see a little bit of where we'd like to be and have more respect for what we're feeling at the given moment so that we don't just dismiss any pain that we might have. Because pain is there for a purpose too. When you look at us biologically, we experience pain partially so that we can get out of situations that are dangerous to us. And anxiety is exactly the same way. If you're experiencing really regular anxiety, it can be sort of an indicator that something is wrong and that maybe some things need to be addressed. And I think that's sort of a powerful place to bring this as a sort of a total package, is to be able to look at what comes next and where you want to take it.
And I think that last thing, what comes next and where you want to take it, is a lot of resilience, And
Absolutely.
the fact that no matter what happens around you, no matter what happens within you, so both around you and within you, you have the capacity to make it. Whatever happens around you, whatever happens within you, you have the capacity to make it, to succeed, to go through and come out of the other side stronger than ever before. You have the capacity to do that. You just have to act upon it.
Yeah, exactly. And reach out, because we all need help from time to time. Be there for people who need it. This is important. I have a bit of a challenge for you guys. I'd really love for you guys to be able to think about the sort of topics that you would like to hear about, that you'd like to talk about, that you would like to make a part of our interchange. And I'd like to invite you guys to reach out and be a part of this with us. Reach out to either one of us through any of our varied social media channels. Talk to us and let's get a conversation going. Let's see what we get to talk about next month, because we'd really love for the audience to be the ones who are helping to choose this and to start participating in it directly. Because as you've seen, we can actually see the comments as they're happening live, and we'd like to be able to, make it something where we even have more people actually here with us, sort of live broadcasting and talking with us. It should be more than just, the two of us. I don't know everything by any means, but it's a starting point. And so I'd like that. And I'd also like to leave you guys, if possible, with a second challenge. So when I was a young boy, I would often ask my dad about things, and if I had problems, I might come to him with the problem and say something like, well, I've experienced this difficulty at school, or I'm dealing with this anxiety over these problems, or I'm just not sure anybody likes me, or I'm having trouble talking to somebody, or whatever it is. And every time I would come to him with one of these pains, my dad would listen in that sage way he has, and then he would say, well, it's better than a sharp stick in the eye, because that's just the kind of father he was. And on the one hand, he was right. Generally, whatever it was better than losing the whole binocular setup that I've got going here. I like my eyes; they're all right, but it wasn't always immediately helpful what he would say. But there was this idea, this concept that perspective makes a big difference on how you experience things, and that is sort of what I took from it in the long run. Is whatever it is, you're going to get through it. Whatever it is, it's probably temporary, and whatever it is, there's probably more painful things out there that you've got to be aware of. So I'd like each of you to be able to sort of dig into some of your own personal experience and reach out to someone, a friend, a family member, someone you haven't spoken to in a while, perhaps, and start a conversation about it, about your own perspective, about the things that now that you're an adult, or now that you're wherever you are, maybe seem easier to handle and seem better in hindsight. Because again, we've all got 20/20 vision now. We can see exactly what it looks like. I'd really love for you to be able to take that, ask them about their own experiences and listen to their stories and how they put things into perspective. I know last time we had a challenge based on a riddle, and I'd love for Alexandra to be able to explain that a little bit. This time it's a little bit introspective, so you don't need to tweet about it. This is between you and a friend or family member. But please do it, and please invite them to be a part of what we're doing as well. Alexandra, would you like to talk about the riddle that we had last time?
If you remember the riddle, I'm not sure if they do. I myself do not remember the riddle,
They
but
might
it
not.
was something
I can
along
ask
the
the.
lines
Oh yeah,
of
yeah.
my first is an article,
Yep.
right?
And my second
My
lies at
second,
the intersection.
yeah. And my third usually comes in pairs, can be reduced to one or none, and some believe in the existence of a third.
Right. And the fourth is the brief origin of a world.
And what it means is,
please.
my first is an article, which is N. My second lies at the intersection, which is Paul. An X, right? Right. And my third usually comes in pairs. You just talked about it.
There's two, and it's better than a sharp stick in one of them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
We're talking about the eyes.
Some people believe in that third one in the middle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And some people don't have any. So you have sharp sticks in both eyes.
Right.
And my fourth is the brief origin of a word, which is the last part of anxiety, which is
ETY.
ETY, etymology. So the brief origin of a word. It's the brief origin of a word is etymology, and then you have ETI, which is a brief origin. So we wanted to play a bit. We wanted it to be fun at the beginning. Now we're getting into more serious stuff, more introspective stuff. I just want to add something about the idea of you sharing topics with us, and consider this discussion as a space where you can engage with your friends, your family members, people you trust. And during this conversation, you will definitely stumble upon personal challenges, pain points, concerns, areas of concerns, skills that you feel you need to develop, thoughts that you're having and that you feel should be discussed. And whatever you stumble upon, needs, pain points, thoughts, do tell us. if you think this could be useful to you and to others, should they be discussed in one of our upcoming sessions. I think it's better for us to ask you what it is that you want to learn and hear and listen to. That's much more participative, and it makes much more sense to us as well, because that's why we're doing it. And it makes sense because what's relevant to you is and could be relevant to a lot of other people from very different places. And if it's not something that is related to your discussion and it's something that you've always wanted to tap into, to learn more about, to discuss, feel free to share the topic with us. And if you have something that you feel like sharing, thoughts, ideas, please do that. Paul started with saying he's in Finland, he's from California, I'm from Lebanon originally, and I have Greek origins. So originally I'm from both Lebanon and Greece. So that's already a good mix, but we have a lot more countries. We have a lot more opinions. We have a lot more thoughts. We have a lot more perspectives. And the more perspectives we bring together, the more interesting the conversation becomes. So it won't be just the two of us. It would be a lot more. It would be much more enriching. So if you have questions, if you have topics, please share. If you have thoughts and opinions and you want to share them with the world, please tell us about them. And yeah, do we have anything else to say?
I think that covers things pretty well. Thank you guys for coming and for seeing us and for being a part of it. I really appreciate the time and energy that you've put into it. And that especially goes for you, Alexandra, as well. Helping to plan and get this together as well has been absolutely fantastic, especially considering the amount of time and energy that you've been putting into things on the ground there as well. It's really just fantastic to be having these conversations in the first place, and I'm quite honored to be a part of it. I hope that you can all join us. Please.
Yeah, and I'm honored to be having this conversation with you. We started it for a purpose. We had our own why to do this. And resilience means that no matter what happens, there's still something that you can do about it. And talking about anxiety and resilience in a situation like that is also one way to do it. So I want to thank you for this, although the topic was, we agreed upon it just before that. But thank you for having this discussion also with me. And I hope that a lot of people would be able to benefit from our more than 1 hour rambling on anxiety and resilience. I really hope that didn't make you feel anxious, because that would be counterproductive. So yeah, this is to finish on a lighter note, to sort of lighten things up. For my part, I wish you all the best of luck. I wish you to be resilient. I wish you to be amazing, outstanding. I wish you to have strength in everything that you do. And if you reach out, you will get the support that you need.
Absolutely. Agreed. Go and have a fantastic week, and we'll see you again next month at the latest. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye.